Right, good afternoon everybody, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joining Cheshire and Merseyside Healthcare Partnership in the room, and welcome to everybody who's joining us online. Now, this is a bit of an experiment today because it's a hybrid meeting, and we're also live streaming so that members of the public can watch this. So if we have some technical challenges, please bear with us. And I thought it might be useful just to run through to remind us about some of the things we need to remember. So for those that are in the room, you've got your microphone in front of you, and there's like a person with things coming out their mouth. And that is what you need to press when you want to speak, but please can you keep it turned off when you're not speaking. Those of you, put your hand up to show that you want to speak. So it might take a bit longer today, the meeting. And those of you who are online, I can see you wonderfully. I hope you can see us. So if you want to speak, if you can put your online hand up, not your real hand. Can you all see where the online hand is? Put that up, and I will keep a beady eye, and my lovely assistant Raj will also keep a beady eye on things so that we can get everybody on. And I thought, rather than what we need to do, because I know we've got some deputies and people standing in for people, so just to confirm who we've got today so we can check we're quorate. I'm going to ask you very quickly to run round the room first of all, say who you are, and if you're standing in for somebody, say who that person is you're standing in for. It will also give you a good chance to have a go with your microphone. So I'm going to start on this side with Jane. Thank you.
So that one? Yeah, is that working? Yeah. Councillor Jane Corbett, representing Liverpool City Council. Cheers.
Jo Williams, Chair of Alder Hay and representing Cheshire and Merseyside Acute and Specialist Trust.
There we go. Sorry. Ian Ashworth, Director of Population Health for NHS Cheshire and Merseyside.
Councillor Paul Warburton, Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Social Care, Warrington Borough.
Sam Corcoran, Leader of Cheshire East Council.
Graham Irwin, Chief Executive of NHS Cheshire and Merseyside.
Cass McAvoy, Business Development Lead for ICB.
Good afternoon, I'm Matt Calderbank. I'm from North West Ambulance Service and I'm deputising for Joanne Clegg.
Good afternoon, I'm Claire Watson. I'm the Assistant Chief Executive at the ICB.
Isla Wilson, Chair of Cheshire and Wirral Partnership, and here representing the Mental Health, LD and Community Collaborative.
Good afternoon, Marlene Quinn, Councillor for Integrated Health and Care in St Helens.
Hi, Raj Jain, Vice Chair of the HCB.
I'd better introduce myself as well. Louise Gittins, Leader of Cheshire West and Chester Council and Chair of the Healthcare Partnership. So I'm going to attempt now at asking the people on the screens to come in. Bear with me because my eyesight isn't amazing from this distance. So I'm going to start Christine Bannon.
Oh, hi Louise. It's Chris Bannon, Cabinet Member for Health, Knowsley Council. Thank you.
Then we've got Adrian Irvin.
Hello everyone, it's actually Adam Irvin. I'm here on behalf of the Primary Care Leadership Forum. I'm also a partner member on the ICB as well.
Thank you. Sarah Thwaites.
Hi, Sarah Thwaites, Chief Officer Health Watch Liverpool, here on behalf of the Health Watchers.
Steve Parks.
Afternoon, Steve Park, Director of Growth at Warrington Borough Council, and I'm representing growth directors from Cheshire and Warrington. Thanks.
Thank you. Kate Schoen.
Thanks. Hi, it's Kate Schoen, Managing Director from Taurus Foundation, part of the Taurus Group.
Thank you. Alison Cullen.
Alison Collin from Warrington Voluntary Action. I'm representing the BCSE across Cheshire and Warrington.
And Amanda Perriton, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It is. I'm Amanda Perriton. I'm the DCS at Warrington, and I'm here representing the DCS group, having Mill obviously left and he was previously on this board, so I've now come on.
Excellent, thank you. Now I've got some other people on the right hand side, but I don't know if they're just watching the meeting or participating. So Paul, you're just oh, so we've got another Paul Warburton. That's mysterious. Oh, is that you, or is it another one online? Are there? Okay, so the other Paul Warburton. Paul, do you want to just say hello and introduce yourself? The online Paul. Can you hear us? No, I don't think he can he? Is there anybody else online who needs to introduce themselves?
Good afternoon, Matt Smith, Chief Superintendent of Merseyside Police, representing ACC John Roy.
Okay, thank you. And Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Wally. I'm representing the University of Liverpool.
Excellent. Anybody else want to say hello? Carly?
Hi, Carly Brown, Change and Integration Director for Cheshire and Merseyside, Director of Children's Services.
Anybody else? Speak now.
Yeah, probably I should have spoke. Phil Garrigan, I'm the Chief Officer for Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service. Apologies for being a little late.
Okay, good. And I think the other Paul Warburton, can you hear us now? Can you?
I can, yes, apologies. I have issues with my laptop, apologies.
Okay. Can you introduce yourself, Paul?
I can, yes. So, sorry, I'm Paul Warburton. I'm the Group Director of Housing for Taurus Housing.
Fabulous, thank you very much. And I think that's everybody online. And Ellen, we've got you here. Hello,
yes.
Welcome.
Sorry, I was having trouble parking. I'm Ellen Loudon, I'm the co-vice chair.
Right, so I think that's everyone participating in the meeting. And I think, are we quora? Has somebody been looking at that? Yes, Matthew says yes, so that's great. Good stuff. Okay, so just to say that after the meeting today, there will be a chair's brief that will get sent out to everybody, which sort of summarises the discussions and helping you to then disseminate that information to your respective organisations. So we have got a number of apologies for absence, which I'm not going to go through because we probably heard that online. So we'll get straight on with the meeting. Next item is declaration of interest. Anybody got anything they want to declare relevant to the agenda today? No? Okay. Then minutes of the last meeting, 13th of June. Are there any amendments to these draft minutes? And I think, Paul.
It was just my apologies were given, but I don't think they've been recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. If we could pick that up, that's brilliant. Okay, that's smashing. Thank you very much. Right, okay, the next one is actions from the last meeting. We have got a list of the actions. I think some of them will be picking up today because they were to carry forward to this meeting. I don't know if any of the owners of the actions want to give any updates. Claire?
I can give a few if that helps. So, in terms of the comms plan, we'll bring something back in September, if that's okay. In terms of the interim item 15, I think if you remember there was a conversation and Neil was proposing setting up a group to look at various indicators, and I think that we sort of said there's probably enough work. Rather than set up another group, we'll do that and bring, I think, rather than setting up a group, Neil is looking to develop some indicators that we'll present to a future HCP meeting rather than make it into a bit of an industry. So I think we'll just bring something back as a draft in September, if that's okay. Item 17, if you look at the forward plan that's coming on at the end of the meeting, we are proposing a health and housing workshop for the next meeting, which we'll probably want to talk about in the forward plan, so that covers that off. then in terms of the the screening, I haven't followed that up because I spoke to somebody at the end of the last meeting and they said they were going to follow that action. So rather than leave that one till September, Louise, I'll do a round robin. I'll follow that up and just do an email to all if that's okay. So hopefully that covers off a few of them, and Kathy, you can pick those up if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And I think the other item on that was the financial strategy, and papers have been circulated ahead of the meeting, but I understand Claire Wilson is actually on holiday at the moment, so we're going to take that forward to the next meeting. I know we have had some questions that have come in, and what I'm requesting that everybody does to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and send in questions so that we can answer those and inform the discussion that we'll have in the September meeting. I know Councillor Councillor Corcoran, you've submitted a question today, and I know that this has been raised at every meeting, but it was just unfortunate that Claire's on holiday for this one, and we weren't going to say no, you can't go on holiday, so I think that's why we're going to bring it to the next meeting. Do you want to comment, Councillor Corcoran?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and I'm quite happy to be called Sam. I was very pleased to see the emphasis on population health in the financial strategy. The difference between the NHS accounting and local government accounting does seem to come out from this, though, in that I wanted to ask how is the ICS going to be held accountable? So that if you're a local authority and you overspend your budget, it comes out of your reserves, and if you keep doing it, government inspectors get appointed, and all the councillors have their powers removed from them, and the government inspectors decide what to cut. And quite often they will close all the libraries and do other things that the councillors really wouldn't like. So what I was going to ask is, what happens in this setting if there is an overspend on the budget? And the other question I wanted to ask was, how do we get involved, or how do members of the public get involved? And to contrast it with local authorities, I sent in the Cheshire East Council timetable, which shows almost as soon as you've set your budget for 1 year, you start on the process for the next year with an initial consultation for ideas. Then you usually publish a draft. That draft is then consulted on, and it's fed back into a final meeting in February for when the budget comes into force on the 1st of April. And I was wanting to see, is there a similar timetable for the ICS? And from a personal point of view, how do I feed into that budget setting process?
I think they're really important questions, and Graham's signalling he might be able to help with that, but certainly that's something we can take forward for when Claire's here. But Graham, do you want to come back? And then I've got Christine online who wants to ask a question.
If I start with the policy element of the question, one of Patricia Hewitt's review points to government when she did her piece of work was to say, government should start a piece of work to better align the funding cycles and the funding processes for health and local government, and at least one other agency I think she named within that. The government were fairly mute in their response to that point, but needless to say, that recognises that that's a real challenge. Now, in terms of that cycle and that timetable, we generally get told what our funding envelope will be on or near to Christmas Eve. So when you sort of think about what are the grant parameters for local government and how that cycle works through, we are actually told, and our process in real kicks off usually a lot later. We're also in an exceptional set of circumstances in terms of both the transition away from how the NHS was treated differently through the funding during COVID, and we're in the last year, I think, of that transition and moving back to a more normative financial regime. But I think the purpose of the presentation that you've got in front of you that Claire will come back and talk about is a process that starts the engagement on the long-term financial sustainability of the NHS that puts the NHS in Cheshire and Merseyside in recurrent financial balance. Now, it probably feels to me a bit opaque, so I can see why that feels to you a bit opaque. But one of the things that we are quite clear is the NHS in Cheshire and Mersey is not currently in financial balance, and that degree of not being in financial balance is being serviced by the NHS running down its reserves. But the trouble is those reserves have existed upon the individual balance sheets of every NHS organisation, and we don't have a formal group accounting model, although the ICB does have responsibility to make sure the whole of the system lives within their resources. And then the final point is the NHS has a process of intervention with parts of the system, and they have a process of intervention and improvement around the use of our financial resources. Now, so far and at the moment, that has required on just one occasion, Claire, myself and Raj being summoned over to Leeds on this case, not being summoned down to London, to meet the top people within the NHS and give an account for ourselves. But I'm quite clear that ultimately, if we do not deliver a satisfactory financial position within a rolling period of time, that as the accountable officer, my job would ultimately be a risk as a result of that.
Thank you, Graham, for that very comprehensive update. Just if it's any sort of reassurance, we get told on Christmas Eve or thereabouts what our budget. And this year, actually, we got told in the middle of February that there was a change when half the councils had already set the budget. So it was all good fun. So yeah, I can see some nodding heads around the room. Sam, and then I will go on to Christine because we've got a lot to cover
Just
today.
to follow up on one point, how does this body feed into the budget setting process, or how, put on a personal note, how do I feed into the budget setting process?
I think that's a question that Claire will address through her presentation to this group next time, which is intended to be starting that process of engagement with you, the HCP, on the parameters we set and the processes that we go through. So I think that's the purpose of bringing that here.
Sam, can I just add something to Graham? In the legislation, it says that the ICB board, the board that Graham's chief exec of, I'm chair of, has to pay due regard to the strategic priorities of this board. Now, due regard, what sort of words are those? They're meaningful for us, and we want the HCP to lead the strategic direction for the integration bit of Cheshire and Merseyside, and the ICB will pay due regard to that, which is not, I would say they're not weasel words to us, they're meaningful. But how we transact that, yeah, we're working through. Is that fair to say?
Okay, Christine.
I think the biggest fear is when you're talking about this and deficits and whatever, is that from a local government point of view, and you know that I'm one of those people who say we need to carry on working in collaboration because that's how we get things done. But I think we just need to be clear that, you know, Place really does need to retain their own budgets, obviously because of the prevention strategy and everything that we need to do in there. So I welcome that this is not going through now, because I think this really does need to go back to Place, really, for people to look at this quite clearly, because, you know, Knowsley, like other authorities, have got a high level of deprivation and also ill health. So I just wouldn't, and I mean, you know, I know that there's some other places that are not in it, financially not, and such a, I'm not saying that we're secure in Knowsley, because we're really not, but I wouldn't want to think that obviously budgets are being mixed and matched, you know, and you know, because as I say, and I think a lot of my colleagues will feel the same, is that we really do need to not just take something through that needs to go back to Place for further discussions to take place. So I really do welcome this, not going to, I mean, I know it's going to go back to place, but we were, in the documents that I received, it was asking for endorsement, so I'm glad it's not on the agenda now, and that those further discussions can go back to place. But as I say, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be collaborative work, because of course there is, that's the only way forward, but not at the detriment of budgets within place. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Claire.
Thank you. It's on a different point. It's actually a couple of other actions from the minutes. If you want me to close those off.
Yeah. So just to confirm on the financial one, if you've got any questions, can you please let Jenny know, so that rather than bringing them all on the day, you've got a chance now to have a look through the paper and then send your questions in advance of the meeting on the 19th. I think that would be really useful. And maybe if we get them in well on time, we could do an almost you ask those questions with some written answers might be quite useful. Okay, thank you. Claire, sorry, back to the action log.
No, I was going to say, talking on behalf of the other Claire, I think she'd probably find that really helpful in terms of answering the questions. So just in terms of action 16, again, that's on the forward plan for November. And then action 18, what I'm going to propose, if that's okay, Chair, is that we take that to joint OSC rather than bringing it back to this meeting, because I think that's more of a scrutiny conversation around primary care access rather than a substantive agenda item for this meeting.
Thank you. And we should really have a rule like we do in our Children in Care Council, not to use acronyms. And we have to put a silly hat on if we do that. So
Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Yeah, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I think that's, and I think in all of our discussions, we do need to remember we have got a really strong Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and some of the things that we discuss, we might actually want them to look at rather than us, and we need to give them some work to do, I think, so they're not twiddling their thumbs. So I think that'd be a really good idea. Thank you. Right, so that's the action plan. The next item is the revised terms of reference, and I think, Matt, you're down as guest speaker. Do you want to just introduce yourself for those watching online? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew Cunningham, Director of Corporate Affairs and Governance for the Integrated Care Board. Thank you for inviting me today to talk to an updated set of the draft terms of reference for the healthcare partnership for you to consider. I'm going to take the paper as read, so I won't talk to it verbatim, as well as the terms of reference. But I just wanted to pull out a few key points for everyone today to consider before opening up to any discussions and any questions. So hopefully it was quite clear in the paper around the express obligation on the local authorities and an IC board in an integrated care system to establish a healthcare partnership, or an integrated care partnership, but we call it the healthcare partnership locally. I'm trying desperately not to do acronyms here, Louise, so I'll try not to do ICP and HCP. What it was probably quite light on, really, was how do you establish this joint committee? But under the Act, it gave a lot more flexibility for those partners, those 10 members in our particular area, to how to establish that joint committee. Through the establishment of the Health and Social Care Act of 2022, there was an added insertion to the Local Government and Public Involvement Act, which is in some respects more pertinent to local authorities in terms of having to establish a joint committee. Other than that, it gave you a few functions that an integrated care partnership had to do, but it was also then equally down to you as an integrated care partnership what else you wished to look at as an integrated care partnership. So at its meeting in November last year, you did see a first set of terms of reference for you to consider, and we did get a fair amount of feedback from colleagues around the table, as well as colleagues from both legal and governance spheres within the local authorities. So this second set of terms of reference have hopefully addressed those points that were raised, where they could be raised. Just so people are aware, because it wasn't necessarily in the paper, I have a meeting tomorrow with all the local authority heads of legal or governance leads who are looking at this, so no doubt I will get some more feedback on these sets of terms of references and hopefully colleagues around the table, if they've had the opportunity to talk to them, they'll have fed their comments back, but equally happy to hear them today as well. So what I'm really more asking about today is, you know, again, some further comments to the terms of reference from all partners around the table, but just to reiterate, the obligation is on the 9 local authorities and the ICB to establish this joint committee, but it is a partnership in its truest sense. What I will also then pick up with the heads of legal tomorrow as well is just confirmation of the individual processes we have to go through each 9 local authorities in terms of getting this terms of reference to the relevant body to sign off, which for most councils will probably be their full council meetings. So we know the dates of them, depending on where you sit across Cheshire and Merseyside, it's either September or October. So we have that window, but as many colleagues know, within local authority, you start the process much longer before that to get it through the necessary forums and committees. So hopefully following today, any further comments on those terms of reference will be fed into the version. What we clearly need to be mindful of is that if we are going to 10 different bodies, we need to be mindful of the amount of amendments or any amendments. So clearly there is work to do on that one. As I said, I wouldn't elaborate too much more on that. I'd rather listen to any questions or queries around the terms of reference or the process. So if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. And this has been a very, very long process, and hopefully we'll get there. I mean, the recommendations are, there's 2 of them, endorse the adoption of the terms of reference. Now, I'm not sure we can endorse those until we've got approval of them finally by all of the council legal teams. I've had some advice from ours, and they're of that sort of same mind that actually they need to be approved by our legal team, I think, before we can endorse them. But has anyone got any? I mean, they look quite straightforward. I don't have any issue with these, but it's just that going through that governance. Raj?
Just trying to be practical, because we can get into a circular thing here. I wonder if what we could do in this committee is make a recommendation, not endorse them, not sign them off, but make a recommendation that could go to the 9 local authorities. Would people be comfortable with that?
I can see some, I can see some thumbs up. Christine, did you want to come in?
I absolutely do, and I apologise because obviously I got my documents a bit mixed up, but I've been reading it. When I talked about endorsement, I was actually talking about this document that we're discussing now. Our authority, and I think, unless you can tell me whether I'm wrong, there's a lot of authorities, or a lot of places, I beg your pardon, places that have the same agreement. We cannot endorse today. It has to go back to the place for further discussions to be taken. So I would say now, from a Knowsley point of view, I could not sit here and say we would endorse that. I would hope, though, that the partnership board will have that close collaborative work with the the places to try and get this process moved forward. But I'm aware that there's a meeting that should be taking place tomorrow, so I would ask that we don't endorse anything today until we get agreement right across. It's better for collaborative work and it's better relationships, and I think that's just my opinion on this. So I couldn't endorse anything today. Sorry.
Thanks, Christine. Paul Warburton in the room, and then Carly.
I agree with Christine, but I think obviously there's a potential here that we do go around in circles. So I think probably it would be a good starting point to agree it in principle rather than endorsing it, which is a subtle difference. And then if it's agreed in principle, it can be actually taken forward, and the discussions can be had with the legal teams of each of the 9 places. And then it can come back probably with discussion here and then further discussion at each of the councils. I think that's the way forward. The other thing that I'd also point out is that the membership is probably very adult focused, and I know we've got a university representative. We don't have any representation from primary or secondary education, and I think it's something that could probably be a worthwhile addition. I know we've got a Director of Children's Services here, but I think a primary and secondary education, particularly the importance of children going forward and from a public health perspective, I think it would be quite useful to have a representative there. So, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I think we'll gather all these thoughts together and then come back in a summary. So, Carly, Brown next.
Thank you, Chair. It was just make a similar point, really, where it's got the other two local authority executive officers. If we could be a bit more explicit that they'd be the other two statutory roles in terms of Director of Children's Services and Director of Adult Services, because we have got the Director of Public Health as well. So I think we do need to be explicit with children being represented alongside primary and secondary educational sector. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then I've got Councillor Jane Corbett in the room. Then I'll come back to you, Councillor Bannon.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of legal, I just wonder whether we could actually get the input from legal and bring it back. Otherwise, because they may well raise things that if we've agreed it in principle, yeah, it needs to be the other way around. And I'm just also wondering whether we can put into the actual structure how we make the decisions, so that it's picking up Christine's point really about place, so that we've agreed a timetable going through. Then it's our fault in Liverpool in this case if we miss that, and we're not saying, I'm sorry, we need more time. So we know what's coming up, and it helps put it through the Health and Wellbeing Boards particularly, and any other structures that we've got, so we know what's coming up when and how the decisions need to be made and what.
Thank you. Christine?
I know what you're saying, Paul, in principle, but in principle means in principle where it may be accepting it. So I'm with Jane on this one. I think so there's no difficulties here, and I think all places have had the conversation about this, so I don't think it's nothing new. I think that we don't agree anything today, and that we make sure that that everybody is working together collectively, and information is being shared at appropriate times to get that decision to move it forward. So as I say, I would personally just leave this alone. I mean, it's got legal, we're talking about legal and things. I think it's such an important document. I think we should let it go back to place and let's get that agreement, because the process has got to be right. It's so important.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn.
No.
Yes, you are.
Sorry about that. It may appear to officers that local government has long processes. We do, but it's crucial that everything that we agree or endorse is accepted not only by the politicians around the table, but by our electorate. And we are elected by the people. We're not appointed, we are elected. And that is to strive to get the best in every area for our population, our place. So I would be most reluctant, in fact I wouldn't endorse them today in any shape or form. Legal are there tomorrow, and they are paid officers to guide us the right way for the right decision for our places. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. Graham, and if anybody else wants to come in on this, can you just show me Alan? Okay. Graham.
Myself, Matthew and two other of our colleagues appeared before the Cheshire and Merseyside Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Friday, and they were critical of the fact that we hadn't fully established the integrated care partnership yet. Now, so, you know, that was two councillors from each of your 9 authorities criticising ourselves for not having yet brought this process to a conclusion.
Well, we've been told, haven't we, there? Thank you. Overview and scrutiny. Alan.
Yeah, just to bear that in mind, would legals, as far as you're concerned, would they appreciate a commendation of this from this board? Would they, from this partnership, would they find that a useful way to start to bring the legals to conclusion?
I don't
know where the sticking point is with legals, so I don't know
Matt.
if they need a commendation or a recommendation.
Matt, do you want to come in? Then I'll bring Paul in, and I've got some observations.
So of course, I can't speak on behalf of the heads of legal, who as Councillor Quinn has articulated, is there to provide the right legal advice to each council. I think they would like a clear steer from each of their respective councils as to what it is they expect this committee to be and its authority, and therefore the individuals who each local authority identifies to sit on this committee. I will pick up with the heads of legals, Councillor Corbett's point around the decision making, and again this might be some of the nuances between NHS, local authority, in terms of what do we mean by a joint committee, and when you meet as a joint committee, you are making decisions on behalf of the 10 partners. So there is, I take your point in terms of there needs to be a suitable time frame for you to necessarily engage with people and give an opinion, but the way the joint committee should probably be established is when you are here, you are making a decision as the healthcare partnership. So you are making decisions on behalf of your representative bodies. So we need to get that wording right. We need to make sure everyone's on the same page in that sense, and you know what you're allowed to do. And there are some nuances, aren't there, between different local authorities and how they're established. So that's the benefit of working through the heads of legal on that way. So I think they would value those points I've raised, and then they can work through the necessary legal bits to give you the advice.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, it's my understanding that there's been lots of discussions, Matt, between you and the other 9 heads of legal. So this isn't something that is going to be completely new to them tomorrow. I thought that this had been a document that had been engaged with, and it's come to this as the latest iteration. So that's why it was my suggestion that in principle would be a good way to go forward, because we've got a starting point. My concern, and I've probably shared with Marlene, is that if we're here representing, in my case, representing 210,000 people, how I make that decision at this board, and I think there's something there in terms of accountability, but also that clarity of decision making. But I look forward to the meeting tomorrow and some further discussions with our head of legal. But I've certainly been involved with them coming to here today, and it was. He advised me to listen to what you had to say before I suggested that it might be worth taking it forward as a starting point rather than going around in circles. And that's my concern, really. Obviously, if the scrutiny committee are critical of us that we've not got the terms of reference agreed yet, we have to make a starting point. And I think it would be good in principle to say, yes, there's nothing in here that we really disagree with. It's a good starting point, and let's take that forward.
Thank you. I mean, I do feel like we are going round in circles with this, and I think we need to, so that we can move forward at pace and do the things that we want to do. Just looking at the recommendations, I would agree about the endorsement if people aren't happy with that, but could we actually endorse the intention to seek approval of the terms of reference by each of the 9 local authorities and the ICB by November 2023? And then it's been in the system for a year, which I think is probably long enough. And what I would say is, I'm going to charge each of our wonderful elected members around the room to go back and speak to your legal, because sometimes they do take, sorry if anyone from legal is watching this, there is sometimes things, have to be done properly, but now we need that political will to really take this forward so that we can deliver on those Marmot principles and all those other things that we want to do. So, Christine, do you want to come back? Is your hand up deliberately?
I just wanted to say, I think it's the right decision to leave it, let it go back to legal. I think it's the right decision to say, okay, let's everybody get together and get a move on, and let's get things done in a collaborative way so we're all in agreement. I take the point on board that somebody says we're one of the representatives, but at the end of the day, we are a representative for our place. And what I would say, what might be an ideal way forward as well, is that when we get information or documentation or minutes or presentations, we get them, if we can, 2 weeks in advance, because that gives us the opportunity to go back and speak to other people within our place, because I am only one person here and I am not the big decision maker for everybody. I am their voice, I raise concerns, I bring back stuff, but I think we need to get it right. So what I would say is, let's get the documentation to us in good time, let's get presentations to us in good time, let's give us time to go back and speak to our partners within place. And as I would say, I would personally just say, can we just hang fire, let's let them have the meeting tomorrow on Wednesday, and let's all come back together, and, you know, legal, you know, ICB, whatever, and get together and try and find a way forward. But at this moment in time, around endorsements or no, because at the end of the day, and I believe, I might be wrong, that I am not the only person in place that is saying the same thing. So that's my call on that one, Louise. Thank you.
So are you, Christine, are you happy that we say that it's brought back for November so that we can agree it then? So that will give us...
What I would say is that we leave things alone. We tell everybody to basically, oh, I bought it online, get the finger out, let's get things done, and that's all of us, including, you know, ICB and everybody. Let's get it together, let's get an agreement, and then let's get it back as soon as possible, which is, say, November. So I think that's a good idea, but no agreement around about terms of references or in principle or anything like that today, but I think that's the way forward.
Okay, so it's noting the intention to seek approval of the terms of reference by each of the 9 local authorities and the ICB by November 2023. Sam, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I've heard this debate before at the Corporate Policy Committee of Cheshire East Council when our head of legal came up with the collective noun for lawyers as an eloquence of lawyers, and predicted exactly this problem, that it goes, you know, who makes the first move? So I was just going to support Councillor Louise Gittins' suggestion. We do need to do something today to enable the councils then to approve it, so that this body can finally ratify it, or whatever the word is, in November.
Thank you, Councillor Corcoran. I'd agree with that, because I really don't want to be in a position this time next year to be saying, oh, well, you've got to go back to it. We need to be decisive now and get on so we can start making decisions on behalf of our residents. But we brought some really important things, clarification around children's education. I think that's really important. We're doing a session in November about children. So I think that's important, having that sort of timeline of decision making, so that we've got, as elected members, we've got that time to discuss that place to bring back here. I think that would, in the collaborative way that we all like to work, I think that's really, really important. And I think we've all going to make a commitment that we'll go back and speak to our legal teams after tomorrow and say, have you sorted it out yet? So, look forward to, in November, for us ratifying, signing it off. So is everyone happy with that as a way forward? Excellent, well done. Right, moving swiftly on, and this is why we're all here. It's the Marmot Beacon Indicators update. Ian, and first of all, I'd like to welcome you here in your new role as Director of Population Health for the ICB and for the partnership, and congratulations, and over to you.
Thank you, and got the microphone working this time, which helps as well. Hello everyone. I'm hoping by the magic of technology a couple of slides may appear on the screens imminently, or do I have to press a button? There we go, it's happening already. So one thing as that comes up, we are all unified on, and something I'm particularly proud of as the Healthcare Partnership is our approach to the work of Altogether Fairer and the Marmot review that took place in Cheshire and Merseyside of all 9 local health and wellbeing boards supporting those recommendations as well. We had the workshop as well, you may remember, earlier this year, and resounding feedback from all members around that was about how do we get focused on the social determinants of health and the work of the Healthcare Partnership within that. So what we're trying to do is bring forward some of those 8 different themes to the partnership about how we're working together on that. And I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot. Thank you. We're having a quick snapshot of where we're up to date with that, and we're going to be joined by one of our board members, Isla, and Dave Sweeney and Becky, around some of the integrated sustainability work that we're going on, and also the recommendations made to us about extending the anchor institute work, extending the social value work right across Cheshire and Merseyside. So my bit is just a small bit here. So we had 1 year on event. Over 300 people attended that. Many of our communities also attended that, and we've had over 300 views of that YouTube website as well as already, which shows that accessibility and, like we're doing today, the hybrid and opportunities to watch things back as well. We heard there around some of Sefton's child poverty work. We also heard around the progress around fair employment in there as well, and our ambitions moving forward around that. We've also created, with the Institute of Health Equity, a new sort of development programme called Altogether Inspired. We have local community marmot leads in all of our areas, champions within your local community and linking in with yourselves. There was an investment by the ICB in the public health system as well, so training up and bringing together some of your leads around tackling social determinants in your local places with national leads as well. So that has been happening during the last couple of weeks. It was also fantastic to hear some of the successes of our local places. So St Helens were successful around their MJ Municipal Journal Awards in tackling inequalities, which is brilliant to see, which very much builds upon the shared values around our principles around Marmot. The Deep End Initiative, for those who are not so familiar with it, this is bringing together some of our GPs working in the most 20% deprived areas of our communities and looking at, again, those social determinants of health, the impacts on housing, for example, and that is really progressing well as well. And of course, the children and young people we referenced earlier, one of only 3 IC integrated care systems nationally chosen to work with Bernardo's and the Institute of Health Equity improving the outcomes for our children and young people. And we have obviously Alder Hay around the table, and our directors of children's services heavily involved in some of that. Oh, there we go. Right. There we go. I'm working off multiple screens now, so it's a lesson for me. One of the things that we committed to were 22 Marmot indicators that you remember. That came about from the development of data and practice and priorities from each of our 9 areas. And that came to, we tried to get, we could have had lots and lots of indicators, but they're all things we agreed on and worked through as priorities for local places in aggregate across the 8 different themes of Altogether Fairer. Today is about the sustainability, which I mentioned. And a couple of those themes, they might feel a little bit soft in regards to managing the outcomes around that, but that's around active travel for walking and cycling, and how it maybe, for example, how we can encourage our organisations, it's not just local authority and NHS organisations around this table and virtual table, about including active travel plans, some of the challenges of transport that we know we've got to try and tackle through as well that might get in the way around that. But there are a number of indicators that we are still trying to work through that will need local areas help around supply chain and how we are recording our employment levels as well, and the challenge around ethnicity and some of that, and getting some of the basics done really well. So I've got a couple of the indicators here just to show you on walking and active travel and cycling. Slightly hard to pinpoint off the tables, but these will be in the packs and sent round later as well. But this should be accessible, the Marmot indicators, to all board members and from the healthcare partnership to look in and go through. The challenge we have with them is they are publicly accessible information that brings it all together. So it's up to date, but only as up to date as the national data that provides. So this goes back to 2020, so 3 years ago. Slightly flawed in a way, but it gives us a starting point. One of our ambitions is to work at a more individual level, so we can look at maybe areas of, let's choose Sefton, for example, of where most temporary housing issues are and where we might need to think about what wards we could target more resources towards, for example, that would link back to the Marmot indicators and trying to turn those dials in each of our local places. So that work is ongoing. That takes a lot more bringing together the different skills, because intelligence and data sits in different areas, but that work is ongoing as part of our sort of data interaction. You might hear linking with the universities, our NHS and local authority intelligence teams as well. So I'm going to pause there really, because the main bit is about moving on to what we've been doing around the sustainability work really. Our ambition is for the future healthcare partnerships is to bring forward more of those indicators, progress, but by different themes of Altogether Fairer, and also taking on board the lessons and sharing from local places and organisations around that. So I'll pause there, Chair, if that's okay. If you invite questions or either or Dave to come on.
Yeah, has anybody got anything to ask Ian? Because otherwise we can press on with the rest of this. We've got Isla and Dave. Here's Dave here. Yes, Jane.
Just a quick one. In terms of, if you look at the cycling one, sometimes, and walking, sometimes there's major issues that actually mitigate against getting decent outcomes on that one due to things like community safety issues. So round our way where I represent, we've got a major issue with drug dealing in the park, heavy duty with, you know, some of the kids carrying knives. The dog walkers who meet in the park, some of them have got people that they meet with who actually they keep their mental health under control through that, are stopped from doing that. So although we might be getting the infrastructure right in Liverpool, which we are, we're really motoring on that in terms of there are other issues there. So I just think it would be useful if we could see what's actually stopping us being able to move forward on that.
That's really good, that. I'll let Ian come back in a minute. Jo.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say that we had a workshop on cycling, walking to work. NHSE came along, Active Travel England came along, Liverpool City Council and the region. And I suppose what I concluded from that was there's a lot of people out there actively engaged in this, a lot of help if colleagues want to tap into it. We got Chris Boardman along and we got, you know, the new bus. But it's just about, I think if there's an opportunity for colleagues to have an event, it really begins to change mindsets. And those issues that are stopping things happening can be raised and looked at collectively. So thank you.
Ian, do you want to come back on those?
I think it's just acknowledging that's how so entwined some of the challenges are, aren't they, really? And which is hopefully the power of this partnership to try and bring some of those common challenges together. And the best is to try and listen how each of the areas have gone about that. How can we steal each other's ideas and, you know, collaborate and get consistency on it? But if there are barriers that are consistent, then there's an opportunity to challenge them in the same way. I know from previous experience with the work with Sustrans, for example, that we tried to do, and just actually the importance of linking in with active travel for schools and parents, and the very, you know, the road traffic challenges around that, and road safety teams that local authorities play a prominent role in some of that, really. So acknowledge that, and this is the challenge that we're all trying to get through.
Yeah, do you want to?
But if I just, so it's noted so it keeps me on track, so I can report back in how we actually managed that and the impact that had in terms of getting over the barriers, because there's some really interesting cycling stuff happening in Liverpool, particularly with little children as well.
Excellent. Alison, I think, is that you with your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've put it in the chat. I'm not quite sure if you can see the chat in the room. So it's just interesting, at a really quick glance, you could see that Liverpool had actually decreased. So I think what you're talking about, there's quite a lot of activity and it started to decrease now because maybe there isn't as much activity going on. But I noticed Warrington had actually increased in terms of activity of cycling and walking. And potentially that could be because we're doing something in Warrington to encourage that, and that sustainability of keeping that momentum going, isn't it? Because we do these events, we do these interventions, but then they tail off a little bit and then activity does. So I suppose it's a bit of a deeper dive into that information that we've just seen and what works and what doesn't work in the different places.
Maybe we could have a week of active travel across Cheshire and Merseyside where we all work together and perhaps plan for it. I think maybe for next year or something like that, would that be something good where we really focus on it? I know we had a little event in Chester and it was really good actually, but we could have a week on active travel right across Cheshire and Merseyside at the same time, and we could really push that forward. I think, I'm quite excited now, I love stuff like that. Sorry. Paul.
I'm delighted to see Warrington's leading the way there with active travel, particularly cycling. But my concern is that the stats were from 1920, and which were pre-COVID. And one of the great things about COVID, if there was a great thing, was that people actually got out and walked and cycled and really enjoyed the cycling and the walking. Unfortunately, there seems to be a step backwards in terms of active travel. But I was involved with the Altogether Active launch last year, and the shocking statistic of that is we've got 2.7 million people across Cheshire and Merseyside, and of those, there's 500,000 who actually do less than 30 minutes exertion, not exercise, but exertion each week. And from a public health perspective, we start looking at diabetes and sedentary lifestyles and obesity, then we've got an issue. So I'd really welcome us getting involved with some Cheshire and Merseyside active travel, and there's stuff that we can do nationally. There's cycling week and things like that that would really make a difference, that we could do collaboratively across the region, that potentially could make some behavioural change. And engaging young people in this and things like cycling to work, cycling to school, is something which you learn. It's behavioural change as well. If we can get kids to cycle to school rather than the parents dropping them off, you get that behavioural change, and it's sort of long-term benefits rather than quick wins. But it's something I'll endorse. So thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Marlene?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what Paul said about the figures, and they are pre-COVID. I think what we've got to think of now is there are many, many workplaces where people are only working 2-3 days a week in the office. They're working in the home. And they're working longer hours in their home than what they would have normally done, clocking in and clocking out at a workplace. There are initiatives out there. There was the Cycle to Work scheme where you could pay through your the actual full outlay of the cycle you wanted was purchased, and you paid through your salary within local authorities. Local authority benefited and the employee benefited via the National Insurance Scheme. When I actually applied for that for my husband, it was full. It was fully subscribed, and we had to wait for it to reopen. Sadly, it finished then, so it was too late. Another scheme has been implemented now. So there are schemes there where local authority employees can get benefits in purchasing a bicycle, electric or whatever. The local authority benefits, and so does the employee. It would be good if it was expanded, or is it expanded, to all public services. Is there such a scheme in the NHS? Then I look at schools. We've done everything with our schools. We have travel training so that children do know the right bus to catch. We do the road safety. We have walking bus routes where they're met by one teacher and a group walk together. But sadly, if parents are working and they're under time restraints, they do take the kids to school, as unhealthy as it might be. We didn't even have a car, so I couldn't go in a car. We always walked, and we benefited from that. But sadly, times have changed, and finances in families for purchasing cycles is very expensive. Schools, you can be miles away from a school now. So there's a lot of things around what is best and what is possible.
Thank you, Marlene. Somebody online had their hand up, but I can't see. It looks like a number 17, and I can't see who the name is. I can't see that. It's too small. Has that person put their hand up? Oh, there you go. Who's that with your hand up? Speak now.
It's me, that news is me, it's Chris.
Oh, hi.
I wonder whether, I know it's really, exercise, travel, walking, cycling, there's all kinds of different ways of doing things, isn't there really? Not one fit all, is it really? So I'm wondering whether from from each place, do you have anything on your health and wellbeing board as an agenda item around this kind of stuff? I know we're trying to see what we can do in our parks, and also we look at our you know, where people go to exercise and stuff like that, and whether, you know, there's even from our elderly residents, you know, what we do with our elderly residents around exercise in our, you know, on our communities and whatever. So I just wonder whether there's it's worth doing anything within. I'm sure you do, but we would having a big conversation about it here, but whether it'd be worth looking at different places and mapping and seeing any best practice about different areas right across. Just an idea.
Thank you, Christine. I'm hoping that's through Altogether Fairer. So we've got Claire, and then Paul, then Ian.
So I was just going to support your proposal, actually, Louise, and do something next year. I think by then we'll have an opportunity to look at best practice across places, across organisations, and I think that's the beauty of this committee. It's the sum of the parts. And look at how we can do things at scale. I think some of the work you were just talking about sounds brilliant, but actually do that on steroids. And you know, if there are opportunities to bring in national bodies, national celebrities to do that promotion, that's what this, I hope, committee and board's all about. And I know Ian and I've had many conversations about, you know, raising the profile. So I think, you know, if we look at the forward plan of this committee and then choose a month, choose a meeting, and really focus on that, but use it, you know, all the organisations, all the public sector and partner organisations in Cheshire and Merseyside focusing on that, be it healthy travel, be it whatever, we can develop something for next year. So I just support your proposal.
Thank you, Claire. Paul, and then Ian, and then we'll move on to Dave and Isla.
So in September 2021, we brought the Tour of Britain to Warrington. And shortly after that, it was completely unrelated, but there was a chap called Rishi Sunak who happened to be a Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time. So I think this is publicly recorded, but I think we should keep it to ourselves. He announced £30 million of funding for a grand depart of the Tour de France in the UK. And it's gone quiet, but that £30 million, I think, was allocated to a budget. And there's been nothing said, so I would propose, for a mad idea, but I think it's something which the whole of the region could get involved with, is that we could put forward a case for the grand depart and that £30 million to come to Cheshire and Merseyside. And if the Warrington experience of the Tour of Britain coming to Warrington for a stage finish, the health and well-being implications of that were, the cost of it was insignificant, really, I believe. Because the uptake in cycling and things such as that helps to avoid sedentary lifestyles, but also type 2 diabetes and the like. So my proposal would be that we speak to, I don't know, if it's the Treasury, and ask them for their £30 million and bring the grand depart in 2026 to Cheshire and Merseyside. And as a build-up to that, there's a fantastic opportunity for health and well-being. It sits with our Altogether Active, and I'm very happy to propose that, and I'm very happy to start the flag or whatever. But the money's there. As far as I know, it's not being utilised. Let's see if we can use it. That's me. Thanks.
That would be great if it was still there, but that's a good idea, actually. I'll take that away and discuss with the two vice chairs, see how we can get that moving. Okay, Ian.
Just very quickly to build on that, we'll take that away. I think there's also really good opportunities to share locally about certain community groups to get low-cost access to used bikes and upcycling, and there is a lot of it. I can think of Bren Bikes in Cheshire, for example, as good examples. So that things we can share across the 9 areas where we can really build on. I think the challenges do come across around planning as well. We think about community safety and the challenges of getting around from A to B different in some of our urban and rural areas, but if we can come together on some of the proposals being made, I think it makes a really powerful statement. And it's just one area of the work that Isla and Dave can go on to as well, really. So,
Ellen.
So mine was a technical question about that data and how it would be updated. So 3 years is great baseline, but we would need, if we were going to engage in activity and commit money to it, we would need to know what the impact was, so therefore understand how that data can be captured again in a more modern way. 3 years ago just feels like 100 years ago, doesn't it?
That's based on an active lives type survey element as well. So, like I said before, we will be working with the Intel teams to see what can we measure, because you take up the cycling to work schemes or what have you, there's certain metrics organisations can capture. There's other throughput and the work that road safety teams do as well. So there's working with the Intel colleagues from across our agencies will bring some of these things together a little bit more for us.
Good, that was great discussion. Thank you everyone who participated. Okay, so we're going on to the next one now. We've got two fantastic presenters. We've got Isla Wilson from Cheshire and Merseyside Partnership, who is a Healthcare Partnership member, and Dave Sweeney, who is Associate Director of Partnerships and Sustainability. So who's going first? Isla. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that discussion has kind of set us up really nicely, hasn't it? Because we're going to, in the presentation, and we can share the presentation, we can show you some of the stuff that's been happening, and there's loads happening. But I want to really challenge us to think in this time as to what we're going to do with that, because you've seen what happened there. So Ian flashed up one statistic about one of the 21 indicators, beneath which sit hundreds of other indicators, and then we all have a discussion. But we can't realistically have discussion about that many things realistically in this room and drive action. And that's the challenge that we're going to have going forward. So there is a sustainability board that meets and discusses this. It's done some really, really good work. We'll give you the examples in a second. But what happens in this area is what happened there, which is that our Cheshire and Merseyside is full of initiatives and it's full of brilliant stuff happening. I could list any one of those 100 indicators and everybody in this room will have an example of what's happening in their place. I don't remember in a year of sitting on that board anybody coming and telling me how they'd taken an idea from another place and implemented that. So we're great at shouting about the stuff we do. We're really poor at scaling that and saying, oh, this brilliant idea is better than ours. I'm going to proudly replicate that in collaboration. And we're going to need to do some of that going forward. And what we don't have is data at that level for everything. Data is going to be a huge challenge for this. So that's one of the other kind of going forward bits. And I think what we need to think about, and what I'm hoping we can talk about a little bit today, is where we focus our time and attention. Because it doesn't add value for us just to talk about the brilliant organisational initiatives happening in all the different parts of our system. So every organisation, every local authority, every provider, every voluntary sector organisation has a great story to tell. Our job in this room is integration and looking at where we can collaborate and where we can be strategic. And so as we tell you about the brilliant stuff that's happening, I think what I'd really like from this group is some ideas about how we move from that into something that's really indicated, really prioritised and really strategic, because there are so many things we are doing and can do, but we probably need a little bit of kind of focus to really do the things that work best in an integrated sense rather than just individually. And I also have a question, which is how are we in that sustainability board accountable here? So I've never been asked that. I'm technically the ambassador for sustainability and social value, and you've never given me a hard time. So how would you like to do that? How do we escalate here? How do we tell you what we're doing? Because the stuff is brilliant, but we really need to move that on to start to have the impact. So if it's all right, we'll tell you the stuff that's happening, and then if we can just have a discussion more about that side of thing, I think that's where we really give this some proper oomph going forward.
Thanks, Isla. And believe me, we live that challenge every single time we meet at the Sustainability Board, which is fantastic. I'm Dave Sweeney. I'm the Associate Director for Partnership and Sustainability. This is my colleague,
Becky Jones, and I work on the Sustainability and Social Value work with Dave. So
we're just going to whiz you through these slides. This isn't a happy, slappy. We're not looking for accolade or any kind of plaudit here. We just want you to recognise that across all the places and all the trusts and the wider collaboration, there is some good stuff and there's some good people doing some great things. But I think just taking Isla's challenge in there, we're kind of coming to the point now where we're asking ourselves the question, wouldn't it be great if we scaled this? Wouldn't it be great if we were brave enough to do things bigger and faster? And so we're just going to give you a few points on this. Do you want to pick over, Becky?
Yeah, thank you. So just to start with, we've been doing this from a social value perspective. So Cheshire and Merseyside became a social value accelerator site in 2018. So it's not something which we're just coming to lightly. It's something that we've been working on for a really long time. And we've worked with colleagues across the system and also with members of the public and local communities to come up with the social value charter. We've now got 70 signatories to the charter. And then from there we said, we've got our charter, that's great. We need to do something else. We've got a social value award. And again, this allows people to be accountable to the commitments that they make. And we've got 68 organisations so far that have signed up to the social value award. Next slide, please, Dave. As I said, we don't just stop. It said, this is great. So we've got our award, great. We've got the charter, great. But we want to be doing things that set the standard for other systems to follow. So what we've got is a system-wide set of TOMs, which are themes, outcomes and measures, working with the social value portal. And this was worked on with colleagues across the system, so voluntary sector, local authorities, NHS, said this is the kind of things that we want to be working towards. This is the kind of things we want to be accountable for. So what that will do at the end of that is it will give us our social value baseline percentage. We'll be able to say, as a system, this is a percentage of social value that we're delivering on based on the things that we're working on together. And that's really, really important because that gives us key baseline metrics. And from that, we can start to work forward and have our plans in place to what we want to do next. So we're working with colleagues across the system to say, this is reflective of where we want to be now. And we keep pushing on with that. And there is nobody else in the country that's doing anything like this from a system perspective. Next slide, please, Steve. And then just from an anchor perspective, so we've got social value, been working on this in 2018. We started on our anchor journey in 2021, and through a 15-month period, we had a series of workshops and discussions. We had over 300 attendees, and we then went out to work with members of the communities as well to say, this is what we think an anchor is. This is what we think are the values and behaviours an organisation should espouse. And Dave always says they're not a grey area. So we've got things like paying a real living wage, committing to net carbon zero, working to use the community's estate for the benefit of our communities. And this is something which we launched. It was on the 12th of July last year, and the ICB were the first signatories, which was a really, really, it was a really exciting day. Next one, please, Dave. And as you can see now, so 1 year on, we've now got 14 organisations that have signed up, and we've got other ones which are imminently starting to go online and sign up as well. So it is working, it is making a difference, and it is starting to say, this is how we do things in Cheshire and Merseyside. This is the expected behaviours that we have if you want to be seen and viewed working in this system. Next slide, please, Dave. But having a system is nothing if you can't measure it. So we've got the Anchor Assembly. Raj sits on it, Isla and Dave as well as other colleagues across the system. We met coincidentally on the 12th of July, so last week, which is actually 1 year on from when we launched it. So I'd like to say that we designed it, but it was just obviously serendipitous that happened. And what we've got with that is, so you as an organisation, you've committed to doing X, Y and Z. So where are you on delivering on those commitments? And it wasn't only from a perspective of asking the organisations, it was also asking us as a system, are we asking the right questions? Are we doing the right things? So I think, is it perfect? No. But we're doing something, we're getting on with it, we're doing what we said we were going to do, and we're leading the way, making a difference. And I think, we're helping to deliver the fourth pillar of the ICS, and there is nobody else across the country that's doing this. So thank you. I can pass over to Dave.
One of the things I'd also like to comment on is the work that's already kind of being generated by, you call them ambassadors, disciples, advocates. But a group of us met to do some learning capture event. And we've got colleagues around the table who were at the event, and that report will be out at the end of July and early August. And what it will demonstrate, what it will say, is exactly what we've been going through today: do more at scale, and that's what came through. It was, I hope it was a good event. I'm not going to go through all these some of the key areas here, but again, you'll see kind of good progress across the year, and we've got this constant movement that's going on. I think, just in terms of as Becky's saying, the first meeting of the Anchor Assembly, as Raj was again pressing and challenging and putting those opportunities for bigger and better collaborations, but scaled, you know, and being brave and having that leadership to do something really quite different. We had a good challenge from our voluntary sector around social value in terms of it doesn't necessarily fit. So rather than just saying, well, that's okay, we went back and we engaged with experts in that field to see how we could best embrace the work that the voluntary sector already do in terms of added value, but how do we measure that and how do we measure that properly? And we've come to a good agreement in terms of how we push that forward. I just wanted to, and I've got Councillor Corcoran in my eyesight here, so we probably had this conversation around 2 years ago, Councillor Corcoran, in terms of a passion around the environment. And a part of the sustainability is around net zero and our challenges around net zero. And again, I don't want to, like Isla said, I want us to get into a bigger conversation. It's not a showcase in this, but I do want to draw your attention to the savings that have been made in terms of the carbon. And this is not about us getting people in strangleholds or pushing or driving anything from a system perspective. What we've done is cajoled and we've collaborated and we've integrated people who you probably wouldn't see on a very regular basis, people who've been in darkened rooms because sustainability has been not necessarily the height of their agenda or their trust agenda or local authority agenda. And we've brought them out of those environments. And if you can see some of those, from a net zero perspective, the NHS is a 4% polluter. And I think it's quite poignant if you look on the news now in terms of what's going on across the country. It is a real thing, and it is a real thing. But just in terms of some of those savings from a carbon perspective, they are vast. And what we've done is we've had the conversation with National, and what we're hoping to do to gain the eyesight of our directors of finance and other people who perhaps not necessarily see those as dedicated savings. We've tried to look at carbon as a currency. So there's a growing trend in terms of carbon currency. What does that mean? The more carbon you save, actually you can demonstrate financial savings. Now, these are not science. Please don't take this as any kind of dedicated mathematical science, but they're based on the baselines that we've took from the carbon findings from from all the trusts and some of those places. And as you can see, there are things like what Alder Hay have done and what simple things like LED lighting, the amount of money you can save throughout that. What we're looking for today is to see whether we can do something that generates that best practice, not just in one hospital, but right across the patch, and we can do some incredible things. The Cheshire, I have to say this, Louise, because you're here, the Social Value Award was generated in Cheshire, in Cheshire, predominantly in Cheshire East, and then it grew and it grew and it grew right the way through, and is now part and parcel of the core offer within the anchor work. And it started off with just a very simple conversation and idea. Again, I'm not going to go through these areas. We've got a good set of subgroups under the Sustainability Board. I would agree with Isla. I think we do need to strengthen that governance, be that through the Population Health Board. Ian and I have had a conversation about that, and being brought to justice and being brought more in terms of being in front of you guys in terms of performance. Within this, we've got a primary care lead as well, and primary care have been. You wouldn't necessarily think of being a major player in this world. You would not believe the passion that is in our primary care and our primary care colleagues. You know, not just about asthma and inhalers and those kind of things, but a real prominent advocates within this piece of work. I'm going to stop now because I do want to. I want to pass over to Isla to wrap that up.
Thank you. So, I mean, that we could have filled, 4 days and 400 slides. There's loads happening. I hope what you get from that is a real sense that across this patch and in this team, there is real creativity, there's ambition, there have been incredible achievements. As an HCP, if we set this team a challenge, they will rise to it. But I do think to really have the impact we're talking about here, we need to collectively move from, Dave used the word showcase, we need to move from that, we need to move from showcasing to scalability, mass adoption, real measurement of this, a bit of benchmarking, hearing the brilliant things that are happening is wonderful. I cannot tell you what a joy that meeting is to hear those things and to get them by email and in documents, but it's really that, what are we integrating? How are we collaborating? How do we move this across the language barrier between all the different organisations involved so that we are really building on this incredible work? We are ahead in so many areas, but that's the next challenge for us. So I've got an individual request. If you're in this room and you do not know who in your organisation attends that sustainability board and you don't get regular reports at the most senior level about what is happening, go back and ask that question or ask us. Make sure that this is engaged right through to board level, because we need to do that to scale. In places, if you don't know in your place how your place links into this, ask that question or ask us, and let's make that happen, because we have to collaborate across the system but implement differently in places, but measuring really important things. And I suppose my question for the discussion is, what do you want from this next year? What do you want from this group? And we will find a way to try and do as much of that as we can.
So thank you so much for that presentation. Fantastic work that's going on. And you posed a really good question. I have no idea who sits on the Sustainability Board from Cheshire West Council. I did notice there was a lot about the NHS, and what I'd really like us to do is to join up. So, for example, on LEDs, I would say that most councils are doing LED street lighting. I mean, we have for the last 6-7 years. So I think what we need to look at, and I'm seeing lots of nods from my colleagues from the 9 places, we need to join up what we're doing at local authority level, not just local authority, Cheshire and Warrington, we've got the Sustainable and Inclusive Growth Commission with some real big actions. We're part of the Net Zero Northwest network, which is looking at decarbonisation of industry at scale. So actually, how can you talked about benchmarking, Isla? I think that's really, really important. Social value is a really important part of our procurement. So do we need that? It's almost like you need a room with lots of desks, a big map, and start mapping in everything that's going on so that we've got that common denominator. And actually, what is the lowest common denominator and what is the highest? And we should all be aiming for the highest, I think, and going beyond that. So that's fantastic work, but I just think we need that joined up working together. And if there is someone from Cheshire West on the Sustainability Board, can you let me know so I can go and speak to them? And then I'll feed that back. Thank you. Isla, and then I've got Paul and then Raj.
So there is, and I suppose I'm just going to add to my plea, is we've got a real mix of levels of seniority in that room. So sometimes there are people who know some brilliant things that are happening, but they might not have access to the data. So when we looked at that presentation, it is really NHS skewed. That's because we can strong arm that data a bit easier. We know other things are happening. And again, it's about what are the integration bits. So how do we have the right people for that conversation? Because with the best will in the world, we'd never talk about anything else if we bring it all here. So we need to get that embedded in governance and driving action.
Paul and Raj.
Yeah, it's just in terms of, I don't know anything about this either, and Warrington Council, like lots of other places, and I'm sure the NHS do carbon literacy training, and the NHS does play a big part in the carbon footprint, but there's lots of opportunities, but the disappointing thing is that we don't know anything about this as councillors. So I think it goes back to that old communication issue really, and how do we ensure that we know what's going on across the patch. And certainly as a Warrington Borough Council representative, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. We are investing in solar farms and e-buses and the like. But it's that shared learning really that this gives an opportunity to do. I'm really interested in net zero, but I don't know anything about this. And I don't know how we square that circle in some respects, because clearly there's lots of people that want to be involved or would like to have an interest in this. But they're not, that communication issue is the thing that keeps raising its head again. But you know, we're an integrated care system now, so we need to have some means of making sure that there is integration and communication as well as carbon neutral, going carbon neutral. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. So I've got Raj, Ellen, and then Jane, and someone online.
Thanks, Chair. I'll probably just start with being a bit miserable, which will be you know, despite some brilliant work that's going on and the passion and stuff, our population health indicators are getting worse, poverty is getting worse, air quality is getting worse. And how do you square that with the thousands of fantastic things that are going on across Cheshire Merseyside and the passion that people have got? Yeah, we're not moving any of the indicators. Now, I have said that before to people in this field, and they say you have to wait, and you do, don't you, for some of this, because it takes a while to come through. But I can't help but feel that we're watering down some of our impact, because we're not identifying a few things that we're going to do really, really well. Not that they're the best things, it's just a few things that we're going to do really, really well. I've seen some processes that can help us do that. So it's, you've put a challenge, but absolutely rightly so. My challenge would be, you need to help us think through, as a HCP committee, what is it we should hold you to account for you know, at pace, at scale impact.
Can I just bring everyone in, then I'll bring you back. So Ellen, Jane, and the online person. Chris, it is.
I was going to make a very similar point to Raj, because you've got the expertise in that group, and you've got a group of enthusiasts, activists, and professionals who can give us advice as to really where we're going to be able to have the biggest impact, and how we can use our collective intelligence and capacity to really drill into something. Because I mean, I'm leading on net zero for the Diocese of Liverpool, and I know that in order to decarbonise things, I not only need to know exactly what the carbon footprint is, but I need to start decarbonising something, and that's actually really difficult to do without the resources and without that professional knowledge. So I think we are slightly dependent on you to advise us as to where we're going to have the greatest impact with what may feel like a big resource, but actually isn't a lot of resource that's available at this particular moment. So it can be indicative, but also so we can see real change happening.
Thank you, Jane. Then Chris.
This is really exciting, to be honest with you. I'm made up with it. I think there was a couple of things going off in my head, and they may not relate, but I hope they do. Everybody has a local plan, as in the planning document, so we're reviewing ours again, probably October, November time. It takes forever to go through, but once those things are in there, they're in there, and then we can hold the developers and everybody else to account as well as ourselves. And I just wonder whether there's some big hitters that we could all agree that at some stage we put in our local plan, and just check out the timing of those, because that could change the landscape. Housing, which I'm made up that you're doing, we're doing collectively in whenever it is September, and I think new housing and retrofitting as well as not only old housing and terrace streets, but also heritage buildings, because there's so many beautiful heritage buildings, and whether we can do something around what are we doing with training around retrofitting skills within that, and that could be a driver. I'm thinking collectively about procurement. If everybody in the room here and everybody in there is just actually drove through specific procurement outcomes that we work back from, that would change the landscape as well. And then the last one is universal free school meals. That actually, if we work towards that, but we did it in the context of sustainability, growing of the food, where it's coming from, because the food system's completely broken, but actually together we've got a huge footprint here, and we've got some amazing farmland as well, and producers and suppliers. That could be something that we could say, let's try it. Let's try it.
Excellent, thank you. Chris?
I think the question before was, what would we be looking for? I think what we should be looking for in the future is real evidence that we are absolutely making a difference, and that it's evidence-based from the Integrated Care Board, the Healthcare Partnership Board, and everybody really. Just that evidence there, that there's information there rather than slides, which is really fantastic. I think from the climate change and that, also knows that we've got our own committee. I'm sure you've all got it in other authorities. And then I think there was a quote, I think it was Samara saying, or somebody saying, well, who's the highest and who's the lowest and whatever we're doing. And I think what we say is, well, who's the highest with impact of what they're doing? Who's the lowest, and how can the highest committee or whoever, or authority, or whoever's going to do the work, how can they support those other people? Because I think it's all about best practice now, and it's about sharing good practice, isn't it, really? And I think that's the way forward going forward. You know, we're all quite unique in our own places, but there is so much good work going right across the patch that we could share with each other, and I think would make a difference.
Thank you. Some great contributions. Right, Dave, and then I shall put my 2 penneth in as well.
Okay, I'm going to just finish up and just to thank everybody really for that feedback. It's something we discuss every single day. It's kind of you know, impact and how you demonstrate that impact, and we're reminded of that. What I think has come out of today is, and especially you know from my right here, is some really good challenges in terms of we're up for this, and that's what I get a feel from the room. So we'd already at our last board a number of the kind of officers there are getting a little bit tired of, you know, let's go out for something big, let's demonstrate. So we're going to come back here with taking up that kind of challenge with a number of probably 2 key areas of work. And hopefully, well, it will be linked in very much with the Marmot principles. It will also be heavily backed with data and research. And there'll be two pieces of priorities that could dramatically shift the dials in terms of perhaps air quality or energy or something of that ilk. And we'll go away and do that. What that does need is scale sign up. It does need leadership. It needs bravery. It needs something that has probably never been done before at that scale. And we can provide that work, and we can provide the evidence for you. And so I really look forward to coming back. I think that will be a proper conversation and a proper leadership debate. So thank you very much for all that. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you. That's great to hear you taking that forward. So my takeaway from this is, in local government, I think we need to look at our procurement social value, and I want to find a way how across the 9 places we can take that away and then bring it to your table and say, right, collectively, we're doing it with the Fair Employment Charter. So Cheshire and Warrington met with Liverpool City Region, Steve Rotherham last week, so that we can make sure we're on the same level. And we need to do that with some of these big things, and we just need to find a way in all the complex systems that we've got and taking it forward. I think the local plan idea is, and I've been thinking about that for a while, because we've all at different stages of the local plan, and we've got different supplementary planning documents for this and that. And actually, what can we do collectively so that developers can't hide in Cheshire and Merseyside and think, well, actually, I'm not going to build out, I'm going to go there. So what can we do about that? And I think there's something we need to find a way of doing that. And the food thing, Cheshire West had a food summit this morning, and it was absolutely fantastic. And it was about growing food, it was about food insecurity, and why not do that on a Cheshire and Merseyside level? It was, you know, a really good mix of community voluntary sector. There were farmers there, the NFU turned up. It was fantastic. There was about 70 people in the room. In a little community centre in Hull. So actually, I think there's something we can do around food insecurity as well. So it feels like we're starting to get our forward plan into place here. And I think by us all sharing what we're doing and agreeing that benchmark, our lowest, and how we take us all to the highest is a really exciting way forward. So I think I'm doubly excited now after all of that. So thank you to everyone. Anybody else want to add anything else onto that? Ellen?
Yeah, just it's to state the obvious really, but really leaning into the voluntary community, faith and social enterprise sector, into the resourcing and enabling of that, because their collective intelligence certainly around food is second to none. And an organisation like Feeding Liverpool, who are trying to work over a bigger footprint than just the geography of the city, and trying to understand systems, and we know that at global scales as well, new systems of delivery and sustainability around how we move food and how we consume and have relationships with food, all of those things. I think if we just really drill into that and ask those questions around sustainability for all of those all of that work, I think we will be onto a winner.
Absolutely. Jane?
Yeah. We're on a roll. Living income. So how can we make sure that Cheshire and Merseyside, everybody in that whole area has what I would call a living income? So, you know, if the only Marmot policy action that we're online, doesn't matter, that the government haven't signed up to, in theory, is actually ensure a healthy standard of living for all. Because I asked, and they looked in the House of Commons library, my MP did it for me, and that was the one that they didn't sign up to. Why not? We've signed up to it, we're doing it. So actually a living income, and then people can choose their own food instead of having to depend on horrendous food in a broken food system. And if that's driven through our procurement with real good wages in there, in work training and progression, you know, ethical companies, purpose-led companies, B Corps, all of that, suddenly it's the place to be, and we'll find that people want to come and live here, and we go, excuse me, you're next in line, we're here already. Do you know what I mean? Just drive it. Be brilliant.
Excellent. Good stuff, everyone. Oh, who's on? Somebody got then? Alison. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Chair. Just to follow on from Ellen talking about feeding Liverpool, there is also a feeding Warrington, and I know in Cheshire West there's something, so I think actually we're all doing something individually in each of the places. Actually, that needs to be pulled together to be more coordinated. But I did actually have my hand up around the social value portal, and to thank Becky and Dave for the work that they've done with the voluntary sector in terms of linking in with the TOMS portal and having that understanding that potentially it's not for all VCSE organisations, and we're now working towards a fair funding protocol.
Yeah.
It's excellent. Really good. And yes, Alison, I don't know if you picked up, I think we need to have a Cheshire Merseyside Food Summit to bring all of that the different feedings together, so that we can have that common sort of goal and aspiration. I think that would be great. Okay. Going to be busy, aren't we? Claire?
Could I just ask about the Anchor Institute, the sign-up? Because whilst it's really positive, and I know each local authority probably has their own anchor institution. There were no local authorities signed up to the Cheshire and Merseyside, if I looked at that. Because I just made a note in terms of question mark local authorities. Just what's going on there, and what can we do? And I guess what can the HCP do to encourage local authority partners to sign up to the C&M anchor institution charter?
They will,
Okay.
and are. There's been some really good early discussions. I think what the kind of early discussion around some of those items, where things take. I'm not saying things take a little bit longer, but it's sometimes a little bit more complicated when there's process and legalities to go through. But in principle, we've got good sign up. I'm not sure how many have actually officially signed up. We should have had one today, but it didn't quite make the mark. So it didn't quite make the presentation. But it is it's a good point. And again, from a leadership perspective, we're not necessarily, we don't want to be coming across as it's the NHS kind of leading this debate, 'cause it's far from it. What we're doing is making sure it's a collaborative approach. So everything that we discussed today is the reason we brought it here today, to show that there are gaps and show that there are missing elements that we need to fill. So it's a good point, Glenn. What I can say is there's good initial interest in being signed up. And there are no grey areas in some of those debates. So the real living wage, it is, you're right, but there's no grey area.
My question, Dave, is obviously each local authority is doing it. What's the additionality? What's the added value of having a Cheshire and Merseyside approach? And what's the missing bit that local authorities aren't signing up for? And I've got a couple of other points, if that's okay, Louise.
Yeah, I've never been asked to sign up to it, as far as I know, and I think that's the challenge I put back. Can we look at what is going on in local authority land and make sure we're all doing the same thing? we've got a We Can, which is Cheshire West Anchor Network, which includes Grosvenor Estates, Chester Zoo, NHS. So that's my concern, is we're all doing the same thing, but on in different silos. Let's bring it together in one big thing. I'm quite happy to sign. I'm sure every single member will say, yeah, we'll sign up to the network. But actually, if we're doing more than you're doing, I'm not going to lower my standards. And I'm being devil's advocate here, seriously, because we've been doing this for years. So I think my challenge is, let's throw everything in the pot and see what everyone's doing. And yet let's have it for Cheshire and Merseyside. And let's not just leave it to people that part of the healthcare system, part of this system. I don't know if the ambulance signed up to it, or the fire, police, and
so
everyone else.
That was my challenge, Louise, really, because I sat on the anchor, your work in Cheshire West when I was in Cheshire. So it was just really, I guess, your point, Isla, in terms of best practice and learning from each other, rather than being parochial. Because I know we talk about place a lot around this board, but actually this board is about the scale and what's the opportunity to do things once well, rather than 9, 10 times. And I think some of the examples today, procurement, local plan, I really where are those 2 or 3 biggies where we come together? Because we've all probably got a green plan, a net zero plan, an anchor institution plan, a this, that and the other. But actually, that takes a lot of resource, and lots of teams and individuals work busying away within individual organisations. If you do it at scale, just think about the opportunities. So I suppose my challenge was around the anchor, but I guess it comes back to let's do things once, and that's what this board's about. It is absolutely the size and scale of C&M, Cheshire and Merseyside.
Isla.
So just slightly to amplify that, I just want to remind us, we don't win anything by just having a really efficient system to measure what everybody's already doing. That's not the point here. So we do need to measure it, and we do need to have those conversations. But if what we do is make a really good record of everybody's best practice, we've changed nothing other than we've got fuller diaries. So we do really need to focus on what is the integrated piece here, and how do we measure that, and how do we drive it forward? Because it doesn't help us just to know that everybody's already doing great work. It's lovely. It's really, really cheers me up. But the integration bit is the bit where we will make a difference here. And everybody is doing great stuff, but it isn't, we're not doing that added value bit well enough yet. That's the next challenge for us.
What are we doing different because we've come together?
Correct.
Jane.
I think an example of that would be through procurement. So if you think about, we're all trying to make sure that we've got local supply chains and local this and that and the other. If the principles are in there, so we've raised the bar, then everybody has to play that game. But we have to play it as well as local authorities. So, we pay the real living wage to our own staff, but we living hours and apprentices and all of that, and in work training progression, and we're getting there. But outside of that, where are we going together? Because the footprint is so big that the supply chains are within, I would think, probably the footprint. So, and how we can support our research and development, how we can make sure that our young people and our older people in transitioning into green economy, there's lots of opportunities, but I think that it's that we're agreeing to work in a certain way with certain principles, not that we're agreeing for one overall plan. Do you see what I mean? We're not converging. We're building up. We're all retaining our place, but what we do, because Liverpool will be very different to a corner of Warrington or somewhere, or Cheshire West, in terms of what we face. But I think if we agree the principles and start with the principles and then build up from that. So, for example, that's why I kept going on about purpose-driven businesses. So we do not give contracts out via ICB to profit-driven businesses. And we'd all say, yeah, sure. Well, what does that actually mean? So I think the challenge is around the procurement bit. What does it mean in practice? Because we will have, in Liverpool at the moment, as you know, we've got the commissioners in best value. Well, let's actually define it for it, instead of just saying it's about money and a bit of social value. No, let's act. And if we agreed it across here, this is what best value is. Wow, social, economic, and green right in the middle of that. you know, crack it. And who's gonna then fight against us because we're big enough? Collectively, we all stand together.
So should we have procurement as a foot on the forward plan and look at bring it together and that? Okay, great stuff. Right, I've got a hand up. Phil.
Yes, thanks. I think Christine was before me. Sorry.
Sorry, Sam Corcoran's head's in the way there, so apologies. Blame someone else except for my inadequacies. Christine, then Phil.
I think we do need to look at what's going on across the patches. I mean, you know, we talk a lot about the living wage and how many people pay it. I know there's difficulty. I mean, in Knowsley, we made a really brave, conscious thought of paying our care homes. It wasn't that long ago, the real living wage, because at the end of the day, it's in the best interest of our communities. It's in the best interest of the people who work there that need to feed the children. But within that contract, it was actually wrote into there that those staff must receive the real living wage, because so many times you'll hear authorities say, we pay the real living wage, but is it really going to the staff? So there's that kind of stuff. Around about our adult social workers, you know, we've got a recruitment strategy in place now. You know, we're going to the universities, and I just think we just need to find out what is going on in other places, and we need to look at best practice. I know lots of people can't do it, but we can talk constantly about people in poverty and that, but we need to see evidence of what's happening out there to make it different, really. So when I talk about evidence-based information, I do, and not shaming anybody, because not everybody's we haven't got any money, but we've had to look at it and say this is important to us and it's important to our communities. I just think we need to start maybe sharing information now, even if it's on climate change and what we're doing in our hospitals, whatever, which was a great from Dave. The presentation was great. But we can talk the talk all day long about real living wage, but at some point somebody has to take the responsibility to say, well, actually, we have to make this. If we can do it, we need to start paying it. So that's just my take on it, really.
Thanks, Chris. Phil?
Yes, look, thanks very much, and been listening with interest around a whole raft of things, particularly around Marmot and some of the kind of tackling the inequalities. But I'm drawn to particularly the latter points around how can we work collectively together, how can we make some significant change. And it's difficult when you are kind of coming to meetings on a relatively irregular basis. You try and pick up some of the information and then you try and act on it. And I think the bit that kind of comes loud and clear for me, and certainly something we've sought to do from a city region perspective, is kind of work cohesively around socio-economic duty and the adoption of the socio-economic duty, and I kind of put that forward because all of the things that we talk about, the real living wage and so on and so forth, if we all were to adopt the socio-economic duty, then we start to kind of consider it in the same way as we would consider any other protected characteristic which supports us tackling those inequalities that we know, irrespective of whether you serves the needs of people in Liverpool or Knowsley, but it extends into Cheshire and Halton. And it just allows us to kind of assure ourselves that we're all focusing in on the right areas and we're all factoring them into our policies, our procedures, our strategies. And maybe that's something that, you know, the kind of partnership can take consideration of. And look, I've done a little bit of work on this for the City Region, and I'm sure colleagues from the City Region as well would be happy to support it. I'm happy to come back and present on some of the things that we've done in consideration of the duty itself and the small things. But those small things, you know, if we're all acting in the same way, can have a huge impact. So look, I'm more than happy to come back and talk about it more specifically, but I think it's those things that you could, you know, hook into and anchor on, and then it starts to make some significant changes in the way we approach some things. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Phil. I'll put you on the list now to come back and do that. That's brilliant. Excellent. So that was a really, really good discussion, and I think we're all starting to get to grips now with the challenge we face, but also the opportunity of how we can do things at scale and really start to make a difference. So thank you everybody for your contribution, and thank you Isla and Dave for bringing that update, and I look forward to hearing as that progresses and how we're working together in a more collaborative way, but doing those big things. Okay, so the next item is, Ian, you were going to, can we postpone this till next time? Because we had such a good discussion. This is about our pledges and what we all pledged to do. So perhaps we need to find, if we bring that to the next meeting. But in the meantime, if you can all go back and look at your pledges and have a think about what it was you pledged, and maybe during the course of forthcoming workshops and things, we can integrate that into it. Is that okay? Okay, so forward plan, there was...
Louise,
sorry?
Sorry to interrupt. Would it be worth us, because I'm sure people have got some information, rather than waiting and any information they've got feeding back to you, so you've gotten some sort of graft or some, rather than everybody going around the table and saying what they've done, if they have done anything, I mean,
yeah,
I think that'd be a good idea, really.
I think that's a very good idea, and Ian's just put his hand up, so maybe he's got an idea around that as well.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. So we'll send out, if it's okay, a very short template akin to what's gone out, and we would really value to hear maybe progress against that, so we can capture that before next time. So thank you in advance for that, and we'll make sure that goes out from the central team.
Excellent. Right, forward plan. So a forward plan was circulated. It's got all the ongoing sort of things, but the key bit for me is the thematic items. And we've got health and housing coming in September. Now, I'm going to suggest we try and incorporate something on planning, if possible, around that, because that links to the housing, and also health in housing can be a supplementary planning document. So if we could have planning added into that. We've got children's services and care leavers workshop in November. And then from today, I'm suggesting for January, we have bundling it up as procurement, social value, social economic duty. So although that big discussion we've just had now, let's have a really focused workshop on that in January. I know it seems a long way away, but it's not actually. It's only probably 6 months, and we can do lots of work in the meantime around that. Now, is there anything else because we've still got March? Anybody else think of anything else we could put onto that March workshop? Claire?
So, even though we've just relatively recently signed off the HCP interim strategy and the ICB's joint forward plan, we will have to do another one, as ever. And we have talked about, haven't we, trying to incorporate and have one for the system. So March might be a good opportunity to bring something back. We probably might want to do various iterations in the sort of probably post-Christmas, but it might be an opportunity to do something in March if we want to sort of put something on the agenda. So that's a suggestion at this stage.
Okay.
Because I think we have said we want to sort of focus it on Altogether Fairer rather than having lots of different plans. If that's the one we can all hang our respective hats on, and then have something NHS-y separate. But I think Altogether Fairer seems to have some currency across the partnership and across the partners. So that's just potential proposal for March. We might want to bring earlier drafts, but I think that might be something good for March.
Okay, I've got Ian, then Raj.
It was just to build on that, really, say, can we think about the themes around Altogether Fairer, like we kind of done today, and for September it'll be around, you know, the housing and the communities we live, and it's just when we think about that forward plan, I think that's where the steer we've got that unifies all the work that we do. We want to drive that agenda, really.
Because we've also got active travel and all those sort of things, haven't we? To try and weave, if we're going to have something next year, that needs to be touched on in this, and something around food and food insecurity as well. Okay, Raj, and then Jane.
I'd like us to think about commissioning an evaluation of the effectiveness of the HCP through the eyes of the people that we're trying to do good for, the communities, but also the impact we think we're having in organisations that are part of the partnership. and with that evaluation, bring it back to a future meeting so that we can actually debate, discuss and say, well, how are we going to do things better into the future?
Yes, I'd agree with that.
And perhaps if we could look through, Claire, through your offices, understand how we do that evaluation, because it's got quite a long leading time as to...
Okay, no, that's fine.
So I've got Jane and then Chris online.
One of the Marmot policy actions, there were 2 additional ones, weren't there, after the 6, now there's 8. Address racism and its consequences. And no one's really picking that up clearly enough, I don't think. We're not, and we're thinking about address racism and its consequences. And we could do that on a big footprint, I would think, of positive action. The Runnymede report on poverty and Section 1, Phil Garrigan on Section 1 of the Equality Act and all of that. The other thing is in Liverpool, our Marmot subgroup has got 2 big priorities with 3 cross-cutting themes. So housing is one of them. So we're looking at getting a housing summit pretty quickly in the autumn, in September. If we have it before the meeting here, I can feed straight in from that. Income is the other one. So again, that links up with procurement and good business, purpose-driven business. And then we've got the 3 cross-cutting themes, which are children, young people, chronic stress, as in the damage that stress does physically and mentally for people, and then climate action. So we're trying desperately to do those big themes and bring all of those cross-cuttings through it. So whether we can do it, I don't know, but it fits in with the housing and it fits in with procurement as well, with the income side of it. So,
thank you. Chris?
I don't want to go on over old ground because my colleagues do it enough, but I think by March, if we look at the, I know we need to speak to our place directors about GP appointments, and my place director has been absolutely amazing, and we do have regular meetings and she keeps me updated. But I know there's, well, there was supposed to be government legislation that said people need to get a face-to-face last March, but obviously I understand that our GPs are under tremendous pressure, so it's not about attacking our GPs. But I've raised time and time again about the systems and about the triaging on the front desk. And I know there's been work taken forward. So as Claire has just said, an NHS thing, that the GPs have such an impact on our communities. If you're sick and you can't get a doctor's note, issues with work, if you've got mental health, all of these things. So it'd just be nice to get by March, I think we should maybe get a feel of where we're up to, what our position is, whether there's been any changes around the triage system, because I think I've said time and time again, if we had a proper triage system, well, we could direct to the appropriate services they need, because I'm really still worried about somebody ringing at 8:10 in the morning who's potentially who's got angina, but they're being told you've got to come back tomorrow or ring back tomorrow, because we haven't got anybody at the end of the phone that can not prioritise, but has the skills to prioritise the appointments. So I know there's lots of work, and in all honesty, I really do. My place director's working really hard with the PCN. She's really, and keep me informed and working with the council. But I think considering there's other councillors that have raised it in the past, I think by next March, maybe we should have a better feeling of whether those things that are supposed to be implemented are implemented and whether they're making a difference. Please don't take this as me attacking our GPs, because I know they work tremendously hard. But I just need to know, we need to know something so we can tell our communities things are changing, because you don't need me to tell you, it's all over the press nearly every day about it. So I just think just so we've got some sort of a steer on where we're going with that would be helpful.
Thanks, Chris. And I'm just wondering, I mean, this sounds like a really good piece of work for Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I wonder, is that on their work programme? Is it something they're looking at, Claire?
Yes, so I wasn't at the meeting on Friday, but I know they have asked for us to go back as an ICB with an update on, I'm going to say, primary care access, both general practice and dental access. And hopefully you'll be aware there's a national document published in May, the Primary Care Access Recovery Plan. So the ICB is obviously leading that because it's very sort of GP NHS. We took a high-level paper to ICB board last month with a commitment to go back in November with our development delivery plan around the national policy document. So we can share that with members around this board. Obviously, it's going to ICB board in November. I think for me, I think that's a really good item for overview and scrutiny committee. And I think we've committed to go back there in either September or November, probably November, to fit in with the timing of the delivery of that plan. So I suggest
Sorry, can I just, intervene? We have help. We've got overview and scrutiny committees, health and health and adult social care and Knowsley, whatever. And we will have different things in different places. I'm just thinking from a Cheshire and Merseyside, what is happening across the board around about those systems, because overview and scrutiny committees may not ask the questions around about, well, access, have you got triage, have you got these kinds of things there? And I just think it wouldn't do any harm in March. We'd have a better steer of what's going on.
I was going to suggest the Cheshire and Merseyside Overview and Scrutiny Committee have asked us to go back. So that will cover off all of the local authorities. So we'll be going back in, I think, November to present there. And we can share the document with members around this board, but I'll take it from the chair whether you want to bring it back here at some point or not. My recommendation would be not, but I'll leave it with you, Louise.
So what I'm keen to understand is our relationship with overview and scrutiny and how we interact. And is there a point where they actually come to us and do a presentation on what they've covered for the year? I just want to unpick that. I mean, we're clear in councils where overview and scrutiny, and they actually do bring annual reports to full council about the work that they've been doing. And I think what we don't need to get bogged down with this on the partnership board is that detail of what's happening in this place and that place. And I think, and I'm not sure who chairs overview and scrutiny, but this feels like something they should be looking at every month almost.
The responsibility sits with Knowsley Local Authority for Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Okay. So Chris, if you want to speak to whoever's...
I will, because we've got our Overview and Scrutiny Committee in Knowsley. I will ask that question. And then remember when I was the chair of the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee, what would happen is then if there was a big item, all the Overview and Scrutiny Committees would meet together if there was a major change with something. So leave that with me, and I will absolutely come back to you, absolutely, with that at the next. Or I'll come back to you offline, Louise, and you can report it back to whoever. But
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's the elected members. You need to, so each councillor's got 2 elected members on the Cheshire Merseyside Overview and Scrutiny, and you need to just keep on for the healthcare partnership.
Yeah, I've listened to some of the Overview and Scrutiny Committees, and the thing is that what is happening is they're asking the GPs, and the GPs are saying we are tremendously stressed and we're doing this. But all I want to know from our point of view is what we are doing, and whether we have got any processes in to help, and whether we've got proper trained people who are sitting on the desks who are triaging. That's all. I just wanted that to find out that right across the board, not from Knowsley, but because have we got system? Is the system right? Well, that's all. If that makes sense. But I will find out.
Yeah, if you could, that's great. So the Cheshire Merseyside Overview and Scrutiny Committee is overseeing the work of the ICB, and they are scrutinising the work of the ICB.
Yeah, and within that access recovery plan, there are 4 pillars, one of which is around telephony and the 8 o'clock challenge, and that's part of the work programme that we'll be bringing back to board in November.
Excellent.
ICB board in November.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Much.
Thank you. Okay. Any other business? Yes. Jane?
A slightly wild one, and you don't have to say yes or no to this one, but it's a thought. We've been trying in Liverpool to see if we can get the DWP to give the information on the people who are getting sanctioned, the households. The sanction figures are going through the roof, and the majority of them are completely illegal from the government. I'll put it like that, and immoral, because they get turned over very, very quickly. What that does to people's income, obviously for adults, they hit the floor, but then it's the children as well. If every local authority actually said to the DWP in a letter, which I can draft from our end and pass it over if you want to tweak it, say, could you send us that data, please? Who are the people getting sanctioned? We can get to them. At the moment, we can't get to them because we don't know who they are. And they're going through the roof deliberately. I can show you the graphs because we've got them off our economic brilliant data woman in Liverpool.
I think that sounds like a really good idea, actually. Yeah, we could perhaps do something from the healthcare partnership, because that will have a big impact on health inequalities. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's the end of the meeting. Everyone enjoy it? We seem to be dwindling away our numbers, but thank you. And I hope the hybrid, I hope those who joined via the Teams found it interesting. And I don't know if anybody's been watching the live streaming, but thank you very much for watching and bearing with us. So the next meeting is 19th of September, 3 till 5 here. And that's great. Thank you.
I was going to raise that, just Louise, if I can, because we're looking at having a workshop. I think we would like to encourage as many people as possible to come here face to face, because I think it would be easier to run a workshop with people here rather. The meeting hybrids are okay for meetings, but not workshops. So
yeah, I would agree. If we could meet in person, that would be fabulous. And maybe we'll have something to entice them, like nice cake or something like that. Healthy cake.
Sorry, can I just make a point that it still says the Civic Suite in my diary entry, which means that although it still says that the meeting, so whoever governs the diary, whoever administration is, if they could change that diary entry to be, if it is going to be here, because I know that people will find that confusing closer to the date, that if it's actually moved venue.
Yeah, quite agree. So it will be here. And we need to reflect
Make sure that's on the diary
here,
entry.
so people don't trek over to Ellesmere Port. As nice as it is there in the Civic Suite. Thank you. Yeah, it's the diary. Yeah, it's the diary invite that's important. Okay, right, that's all us done. Thank you very much to and